She was paid by James O'Brien's heavyweights, allegedly, but she would just rip the phone lines out, leaving me with no callers.
Breaking right now, Katie Hopkins has given her most dramatic, emotional, and revelatory interview yet. And trust me, Britain's mainstream media are on the ropes as a result of this. She sat down in Shoreditch, the heart of woke London, with Brogan-Garrit Smith of the Getting There podcast. And she was finally prepared to unleash, including on her former colleagues at LBC Radio. I call it now the Labour Broadcasting Company, like James O'Brien, like Sheila Fogarty, because she revealed they had previously ambushed her show. Watch.
It was so nice in the heart of London. I was so hated there by James O'Brien. Yeah, I was like, but it was so brutal to go in that building because they all hated me so much. They did so many things to me. And Fatty Fogarty wouldn't even, Sheila. She wouldn't even change studios with me. She wouldn't even come in to change over in a professional manner.
And didn't you have somebody pulling your phone lines as well?
Yeah,
so it looked like you had...
She was paid by James O'Brien's heavyweights, allegedly, but she would just rip the phone lines out, leaving me with no callers to try and throw the show. I was fired from there anyway.
And there's much more where that came from in just a moment. Charlie Downs with me and Brogan-Garrit Smith behind that incredible and fascinating interview. I feel very privileged to have watched it all. It will be released on Getting There this weekend. Brogan, first set the scene for me, because this was not just a normal interview. Given the fact that you decided to host it at the heart of woke London, there were protesters outside, there were police on duty.
Oh, it was a time to be alive.
You had people trying to shut it down, right, for weeks.
Oh my God, the chaos. It was crazy. So we found this fantastic venue in Shoreditch and we sold out over 3 months ago. And in the lead up to the event, the venue had received a couple of emails, and then in the week leading up, I can only use the words bombarded, harassed. They received dozens and dozens of emails from the woke crew urging them to shut down this interview. They then went into neighbouring businesses to put pressure on them. They then went as far as finding out the people that simply took the bookings for the venue and finding out their names and tagging them on LinkedIn as racists.
Simply because you wanted to interview Katie Hopkins. That's it.
All we wanted to do was have a safe, honest conversation. That's it, like with all of my guests. You've been a guest, Dan. You know how it is. A safe, honest conversation about her journey in getting there. Nothing else, nothing to do with the left lot. And they were trying to tear us down. And they went to the Hackney Licensing Committee. They went to the council. They contacted the Metropolitan Police. They flyed against the event in Hackney and Shoreditch, all along the streets. Now, most venues would have crumbled under pressure like this. And I can see now firsthand why she lost so many venues. And it's terrifying, you know. One thing anybody doesn't want to ever be called is a racist. But what that does, it has the capability of putting people like me or the people who are taking the bookings in a box, because nobody would talk to a racist. And they showed up. They were beyond aggressive. And I'm actually surprised that the police let them be as aggressive as they were. They had megaphones and they were screaming Dan into the megaphone. They were then went off at a tangent and blamed her at some point for climate change. I don't know. I think they were just running out of abuse. But they went up to my guests and they were swearing at them. And I couldn't believe what these people were trying to do to simply stop us from having a conversation.
I mean, it is
And for me,
extraordinary.
it's
But
frightening.
what I love, and where I think maybe things are changing, is that all of those people walked past those protesters, went into the room, and were excited and happy to be hearing from Katie Hopkins. And she didn't disappoint. And obviously, we've got much more of the content to preview before your full interview on Sunday. Charlie Downs, let me bring you in on this. Can I ask specifically about those revelations that Katie made about LBC, specifically James O'Brien and Sheila Fogarty, essentially trying to hijack her show? And we know, Charlie, that it was James O'Brien who managed to get Nigel Farage sacked from LBC. So it's almost like there was a left-wing coup at the station that used to represent the working class in this country, used to be the station of the black cab driver, and now is the station of the woke elite. No wonder its owner, Global, is losing tens of millions of pounds. They deserve to, don't they?
It's really interesting, this. I mean, something that I said earlier on the show is the fact that the kind of regime that we live under in Britain, it doesn't begin and end with the public-facing elected element of government in the House of Commons. It's actually sprawling and extends into these kind of nominally separate institutions like the media. Now, LBC is kind of, LBC is what you listen to if you want to hear what the ruling class are thinking and talking about. It's actually a very useful tool for that reason. Somebody like James O'Brien, who again presents himself as being a bit of a shock jock, as being somebody who is a little bit fight the power. I mean, his book, what's it called? How They Broke Britain. I mean, as if he's not part of the ruling class, as if he's not a mouthpiece of power himself. So it's no surprise to me that, these allegations that Hopkins has made against him and some of the other staff at that particular outlet doesn't surprise me, because these people do not tolerate dissent. They do not tolerate different opinions. They are, in the proper sense of the word, bigots. They're not interested in having a conversation. They would rather just censor and attack and smear and defame. And it's just very interesting. And I would add to that, actually, on that same point, something very interesting that Brogan just said is these protesters outside the venue and the police being quite kind of easy with them. That's because they're on the same side. That's because the interest group that those protesters represent are essentially the government, the state. Because in what way, if one of those protesters was to walk into Whitehall, if one of those protesters was to walk into, a corporate HR department and complain about Katie Hopkins and say that she's a racist and say that, equality, diversity, and inclusion are the most important things, they would find themselves among friends. And the police, unfortunately, and, there was a time where I would have said that I'm a great respecter of the police, but I actually think the police force in the United Kingdom has become so atrophied. They are just the foot soldiers of the regime. They are the iron fist of the power structure. They're standing there really among allies because they ultimately represent the same interest group.
Yes, and of course, the police in London, at least, are under the control, under the purview of a certain Sadiq Khan. And in the interview with Brogan, Katie didn't hold back about London's mayor.
We lose our ability to celebrate our identity, do you feel, from you being in the eye for so long?
Yeah, well, I think a couple things. No, I don't speak for anyone but myself, but let it be known, the Muslim mayor of London will never be a sir in the eyes of ordinary British people. Never, 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 never. He has no right to be the mayor of London and is not regarded as such. My message to anybody internationally watching this is that he does not speak for the British people, nor will he ever speak for the British people.
Now, what was so fascinating about this interview with Brogan on Getting There and Katie Hopkins is that it wasn't just Katie talking about the news, but also the huge impact that cancellation had on her life. I obviously feel a lot of empathy and sympathy for what she went through, given I had a similar cancellation in 2023. And Katie, when she was talking about her sacking from the Daily Mail, which she reveals here she's actually writing about in a tell-all book, which is going to be big, really summed up how cancellation works. It's all about pressure from external forces and mainstream media organizations and corporate giants who are just not prepared to stand up for their stuff and in turn stand up for the people. Because of course what Katie Hopkins was doing, what I was doing, was representing the people. Watch this very fascinating exchange and we'll get reaction from Brogan and Charlie off the back. But first, sleep quality declines in people as early as 30. When you were young, your body was producing a good amount of sleep-regulating hormones. As you get older, your body's ability to produce those hormones decline, making it harder to fall asleep and stay asleep. Now, I tried everything to help improve my sleep, right? Like not eating or working out 3 hours before bed, banning blue light devices, loads of unnatural products, but nothing has moved the needle like evening being by Verso. After 3 years of perfecting the formula, they created a melatonin-free drink with clinically studied, patented ingredients. It's formulated to calm an active mind, help you fall asleep faster, stay asleep longer, and improve deep and REM sleep, all without creating dependencies or causing morning grogginess. Now, I actually look forward to drinking Evening Bean every night, not only because it helps me fall asleep faster without having to get up in the middle of the night, but I wake up easier too, and it tastes good. It's become my new nightcap. It's also great if you're vegan or on the keto diet. So click the link in the show description or head on over to evening.ver.so/outspoken and use the coupon code outspoken at checkout to save 15% on your first order. Try Evening Bean tonight and wake up feeling refreshed tomorrow. That address, evening.ver.so/outspoken and use the coupon code outspoken at checkout to save 15%. But now, back to the show.
What happened?
Yes, I'll do it in brief. I don't like talking about myself. I know that seems like I'm always talking, but I'm usually talking about something else that matters. And B, I couldn't tell anyone what was happening to me because I was universally hated. I was a monster. I was seen as being the worst person ever. And so it didn't matter if I tried to tell what was happening because no one would listen nor care. They'd say, well, you deserve it. But I can tell it now, a little. So on that day, that column went in, and then my boss, the God figure at the Daily Mail, received emails coming from everywhere because of everyone knew where I was and what I was about to tell, which is that the movement of human flesh is a coordinated movement of human flesh that is very, very profitable and profits governments and churches and heads of synagogues and all the major organizations take their pound of flesh. Trafficking, but it's the biggest people who take the cash from moving humans across into our country. And I was going to tell that story, and my boss received emails. All of a sudden he went, what the hell is going on? And I'm about to publish all of those emails in a book because it's time people saw. The chief, yeah, it's coming. I don't care now. Because my boss sent those emails straight to me, so I'm putting them in a book for everyone to see. The chief rabbi, all of the board of deputies, signatures from all the heads of the Christian and Catholic churches, heads of supermarket chains copied in, Brendan Cox from Save the Children, big NGOs, large charities, Labour, heads of Labour, all demanding my removal, and I was fired that day, effectively. They kept me on for 3 months to shut me up, but I was fired on the same day as I was stood on the shore in Italy.
How did that feel?
You know, it's not being fired from your job. It's the other stuff. It's the fact that you're then a leper, that people who know you don't want to know you. If they see you, they look as, it's almost like you're a ghost, because it's almost like they look straight through you. They didn't catch your eye anymore.
My God, I know exactly how that feels, Brogan. I went through something very similar. And what's interesting is that later in the interview, Katie said, look, these people, they want you to swing from a tree. That is actually what cancellation is about. They want to finish you off.
She is, without doubt, one of the most strong women I have ever met. And I think a lot of that is to do with the work as well, you know, her Sandhurst training and everything else. But she spoke openly, Dan. She was picking her tree. This isn't, oh, you know, a passing thought. The weight of this attack was so heavy. She was completely ostracized. I mean, she speaks about it being a coordinated attack, like she said, on those boats. Like, they wanted to make it so she completely was obliterated. And I won't ruin the rest of the interview, but obviously things have gone on and they've progressed. And thank God Katie's still here, because she has that tale to tell for people like us who didn't know the weight of these kind of attacks. And I feel hopeful for her now. And unfortunately, there aren't people as strong enough as Katie, and most of them would be silent and give in, you know, and that is what's happening. And I felt it myself when I've tried to speak to people that whose narrative simply doesn't fit the mainstream media's narrative. They will just stop it. And this is happening.
It is happening. No, it is happening every day. And the thing is, she was one of the first to be cancelled. But Charlie, what I found really interesting about that is it's an explanation, I guess, of how it works. So the Mail probably don't actually want to sack Katie Hopkins or me because we were both their most read columnists, right? But when you have a major supermarket brand who is spending millions and millions of pounds a year in advertising, pressuring you, they give in.
Well, it shows you, doesn't it, that people are allowed to occupy a position until they aren't, right? One thing I will say, perhaps offering a little bit of a dissenting view here, an alternative viewpoint, is I think there's a conversation to be had about the fact that, to be honest with you, in my own life, I think if you were to present Katie Hopkins to most of the kind of ordinary, not particularly politically minded people that I know, she would kind of bounce off them. I don't think, I think ordinary people who I know would view her as being a kind of unpalatable figure, similar in that way, actually, to Tommy Robinson. And so in a certain way, I think it's actually in the interest of the power structure that governs us that the opinions that Katie Hopkins has and represents are coming from somebody like her. Because and I'm not saying I don't like her. I'm not saying that I think she's a bad person or anything. I'm just saying that from a value-free perspective, I think a lot of ordinary British people find her and her ilk quite difficult to stomach, right? And it's actually therefore in the interest of power that radical dissident opinions are coming from someone like her, or indeed someone like Tommy Robinson, because it's then very easy to paint those opinions as being the opinions of cranks and the opinions of outsiders and weirdos and unpleasant people and all that sort of thing.
But what's so different about Katie, though, Charlie? What's so different about Katie, right, is she was absolutely an insider. She was a mainstream figure. I mean, she found fame on The Apprentice. She was on This Morning constantly. She had a column in The Sun. She had a column in the Daily Mail. And actually, if you look at the things that she was writing about that got her cancelled, it was no different to what any mainstream politician on the right now says.
Yeah, no, I'm not denying that she was certainly a mainstream figure. But I suppose what I'm saying is, perhaps there's a reason for that, because perhaps that presents those kinds of opinions in a certain light. Whereas if it was somebody, for instance, somebody young, somebody who is a little bit maybe more relatable, a little bit more palatable in the kind of mainstream mind, I think that the system would view a figure like that with a far higher level of fear, because I don't necessarily know whether Katie Hopkins is somebody who could truly win a majority of people over to the positions that we hold, for instance. And I think that there is an extent to which she actually puts people off. But to actually get back to the point here, right, about her cancellation, because that's what we're talking about, I do think that is really interesting, because it's obvious that there is a line, an invisible line, that if you cross it, suddenly you're not allowed to speak anymore. And Dan, I know this is something that you've experienced personally, and I know plenty of people personally and professionally who have undergone the same experience. And it's just very interesting that you know, we have this kind of nominal commitment to free speech by our various institutions. I mean, the ECHR, for instance, which is something that is derided in the press and in the right-wing press, certainly, but held up as something sacrosanct by the, you know, by the power structure, by the government. You know, the idea of leaving the ECHR is you know, beyond the pale. That actually does have free speech as one of the human rights, and yet we still have this situation.
Yeah, right.
Where we
when
don't
they
have free
want
speech in
to
our society.
finish you, you are finished. I mean, in my case, River, I was cancelled from the mainstream media for laughing. It wasn't even for saying anything. Laughing awkwardly at a joke that Lawrence Fox told. Brogan, you wanted to come in.
No, I wanted to say, I believe she became too powerful. She had the most read column. She had an extremely successful radio show. And Charlie's, I know she plays up to this huge caricature, and we spoke about it in the interview. You know, she likes leaning into the baddie role. She knows what she's doing. She's not someone that sits on the fence. But ultimately, you go back and look at the things that she's saying. She's only expressing the opinions of most of the British people. There's nothing too radical about her views. And I think she plays up to the caricature, and that's probably what gets the attention. But for me, she had too much of a voice and a platform.
I just want to show another really fascinating part of the interview, Brogan. And this is where you discussed the whole thing of, and it's, Charlie, something you were referring to earlier, are working class folk who have strong opinions in the UK treated differently to people who have a posh accent but maybe are saying similar things. And the examples that she uses and that you use, Brogan, are Tommy Robinson versus Douglas Murray. It's a really fascinating discussion.
Thank you.
It's like, oh my God, you vile, uneducated pig. Yet his peers that were more educated could make the same jokes and get away with it. And I feel that we kind of see this with Douglas Murray, right? Douglas Murray is an upper class, well-educated gentleman that expresses the same views that both you and Tommy Robinson does. Douglas has a column in The Spectator. Tommy Robinson is in prison and also deemed a far-right activist. So I'm wondering, at what point is class an issue as well?
Yeah, it's you know, that is absolutely the question. And so much love to Tommy and his family and Tommy's children and Tommy's former wife, because obviously completely separate. But I just think absolutely. And what's so wonderful about Douglas Murray, unlike so many others, is Douglas absolutely acknowledges that. It's a really lovely thing that Douglas says, I can say this. Yeah, because of my class, because of my accent, because of my education, I can say this, and Tommy can't. And that's a really magic thing that Douglas does, because he has such a massive audience. And I think what's important, and one of the things, not Tommy at all, but others, is what we must never do is turn in and fight ourselves. So if someone on our side, the side that just wants everyone to be okay and as free as they can be, is criticising someone else who's in the freedom movement, loosely, you know, whatever you believe, I never think we should be turning in and criticising ourselves. I think Douglas has such a vital role to play in The Spectator, with the, you know, the Shoreditch lot probably wouldn't protest Douglas. I mean, maybe they would. You know, then you've got Tommy, you know, street level warrior. You know, I have a role. You have a role. Dapper, what a great guy. So we all have a role to play. We mustn't criticise.
Absolutely fascinating interview. You're going to want to watch the whole thing when it is out on Monday. So make sure you subscribe to the Getting There pod, available on all the platforms. But of course, I much prefer it on YouTube, when you can see the visuals and you can watch the interviews with the likes of myself, Tommy Robinson, and from Monday, Katie Hopkins. Thank you so much for watching Dan Wootton Outspoken. Please click on my face just to the bottom left to subscribe to this brand new independent news source and turn on the notification bell so you'll be alerted to our brand new live shows, uncancelled interviews, and special royal episodes. Outspoken is also now available as a podcast, so you can listen to the show every weekday on the go, wherever you are.